Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber. The afternoon session is about to reconvene. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Do you have any items to the record?
I do, Mr. President. Your committee reports to general file legislative bill. Your Committee on Government reports to general file legislative bill 626 that will be placed on general file with committee amendments. Additionally, amendments to be printed. Senator Bowles to LB 600. That's all I have at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members will now proceed back to the agenda. Legislative Bill 334A. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 334A, introduced by Senator Stinner, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations, appropriates funds to aid in the carrying out of the provisions of Legislative Bill 334. The bill is read for the first time on March 27th of this year and placed on general file.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Stinney recognized to open on LB 334A.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Legislature, LB 334 is the A bill to LB 334, which would provide an increase in appropriations to the Business Innovation Act by eliminating the angel investment tax credit. The A bill would appropriate $100,000 to the Department of Revenue from the general fund for 2019-20 for a one-time cost incurred under the provision of LB 334. This cost is offset from the original $4 million transferred from the angel investment tax credit, bringing the fiscal impact of LB 334 to zero. If you will recall, we discussed from the discussions on the committee amendments, $3.9 million will be allocated for tax credits, thereby offsetting the costs incurred from the Department of Revenue. And if you recall earlier today, we reached a compromise, which will be another A bill that will come in to amend this A bill. The original dollars of 3.9 then will go to the governor's emergency fund. The second part, or the $4 million, will then go into the, will be amended into the Business Innovation Act. On that, I would ask your green vote on LB 334A.
Thank you, Senator Stinner. Is there any discussion of the bill? I see none. Senator Stinner, you recognize close. You waive close and question whether the body's advance of LB 334A to ENR initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
33 ayes, 1 nay on the advancement of the bill.
LB 334A advances. Proceeding on the agenda to General File 2019 Speaker Priority Bills, LB 356. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 356, introduced by Senator Scheer, is a bill for an act relating to motor vehicles, changes the feed distribution for certain specialty plates as prescribed, and repeals the original section. The bill was read for the first time on January 16th of this year, and it was referred to the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee. That committee reports the bill to general file with committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Speaker Scheer, you recognized to open on LB 356.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 356 is a simple bill to reallocate funding received through the sale of the Sammy Superheroes Pediatric Cancer Research Plate. Currently, all the money going through the plate purchases go to either the Highway Trust Fund or the DMV. LB 356 would reallocate 85% of that revenue to the University of Nebraska Medical Center to be used for pediatric cancer research. However, this process has been changed via the committee amendment, which I agree with, AM 731 and Senator Friesen's AM 1167. Senator Friesen will be speaking immediately after me on the amendments, and I will yield the rest of my time to him to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the clerk indicated, there are amendments from the Transportation Committee. Senator Friesen, you recognized to open on the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Speaker Scheer. The committee amendment to LB 356 makes changes to the Sammy Superhero Bill. As introduced, makes changes to existing law, adds portions of provisions of introduced bills LB 128, LB 215, and LB 691. The committee undertook a study of existing license plate law, and this amendment is a good effort to bring uniformity and consistency to Nebraska license plate provisions. As LB 356 was introduced, the bill would have provided for an organizational plate to distribute proceeds from the sale of plates to public entity. We believe this was a bad precedent, and this amendment converts Sammy superhero plates from an organizational plate type of plate to a specialty plate. It changes the price of the application fee from $70 to $40 for a message plate and $5 for an alphanumeric plate, which is consistent for these types of plates. Pediatric cancer research at UNMC would receive the entire $5 from the sale of the alphanumeric plates and $30 from the sale of message plates, with $10 going to the Department of Motor Vehicles cash fund. Again, this is uniform with this type of plate. LB 128 was Senator Hughes' bill that would have created 3 new wildlife plate designs, including bighorn sheep, sandhill cranes, and the cutthroat trout designs. The amendment replaces the cutthroat trout design with an ornate box turtle design, as was introduced in LB 691 by Senator Kavanaugh. Proceeds from the $5 alphanumeric plate and $30 of the $40 message plate would be distributed to the Wildlife Conservation Fund, with $10 of the message plate would go into the DMV cash fund. And again, we are being consistent with the plates. LB 215 was introduced by Senator Linehan to create a prostate cancer specialty plate. The price of the application fee would have been $40 for the message plate, but no application fee for the alphanumeric plate. The amendment provides a $5 fee for the alphanumeric plate and earmarks $5 from that plate and $30 from the $40 from the message plate to the Nebraska Prostate Cancer Research Program at UNMC. The remaining $10 would go to the DMV cash fund. All new plate applications and distributions would be effective January 1, 2021. With respect to the existing license plate law, the amendment would make the following changes. First, it would adopt a standard division of proceeds from sales of standard message plates, which is $40, Husker Spirit plates, which are $70, and organizational plates, which are $70. The committee amendment would adopt a standard 70-30 split between the Highway Trust Fund and the DMV Cash Fund. However, we found out after we adopted the committee amendment that the numbers we were using were inaccurate. Therefore, an amendment to the committee amendment is pending that will change that proposed split between the Highway Trust and DMV. You will note that no distributions to any organizations are made from sales of these types of plate. Second, the amendment provides consistency in application fees for specialty plates by charging $40 for message plates, $5 for alphanumeric plates. And because there is currently no application fee for the breast cancer alphanumeric plates, the amendment adds a $5 fee and designates the UNMC Breast Cancer Navigator Program as the beneficiary of the $5 alphanumeric fee and $30 of the $40 message plate fee, with DMV Cash Fund receiving the remaining $10. Third, the amendment provides consistency for one license plate programs by the one license plate program that was charging $50 for both the special interest motor vehicles and the one plate plus sticker program. Finally, the amendment provides that DMV shall discontinue the issuance of certain specialty plates if there are no more than 250 plates issued of that type for 2 consecutive years, beginning no earlier than the year after the initial issuance of the plates. The Gold Star, Purple Heart, XPOW, Pearl Harbor Survivor, and Disabled American Veteran plates would be exempt from this provision. As indicated, there's an amendment to the committee amendment that I would ask you to adopt in addition to the committee amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Senator McAllister would like us to recognize some guests today. We have 34 fourth graders from the Oak View Elementary School in Omaha, Nebraska. Would the Oak View fourth graders please rise up in the north balcony? I'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Also, Senator Lowe has some special guests today. We have 18 fourth graders from the Faith Christian School in Kearney, Nebraska. Would the Faith Christian fourth graders please rise? I'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President. Senator Wayne offers floor amendment 38. I have a note that the senator wishes to withdraw.
FA 38 is withdrawn.
Senator Friesen would offer AM 1167 to the committee amendments.
Senator Friesen, you recognized to open on AM 1167.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I indicated in my opening on the committee amendment, we have an amendment to the committee amendment. AM 1167 changes the division of proceeds between the Highway Trust Fund and the DMV Cash Fund from the sale of standard message plates, Husker plates, and organizational plates to 60% to DMV, 40% to Highway Trust. This reflects the historical allocations from the sales of these types of plates, and I stated earlier that no organization receives any money from the sale of these plates. And second, we clarify the language in DMV's mandate to eliminate slow-selling plates to provide that the time for discontinuing will be in the year license plates are reissued. Currently, we reissue license plates every 6 years, and the next reissuance will be in 2003. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Debate is now open. LB 356, the committee amendment, and the amendment to the committee amendment. Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I had not discussed this with Senator Scheer because I just became aware of the fact that his bill is up, and I will not attempt to do this on his bill, but just to alert him of what I have in mind, to make it a matter of record, and to serve notice to the Game and Parks Commission. When I offered a bill to create a mountain lion conservation plate, the Game and Parks Commission came over and spoke officially against the bill. I emphasize, they spoke against it. Without being aware of the types of funds, legitimate funds, and a slush fund, which they call this education fund, I, under the bill, directed the money to the wrong fund, thinking that they would use it to educate about the mountain lion and conservation. They have not used it for that purpose. Instead, they have established not only a mountain lion hunting season, but a supplemental one, and in some instances they allow dogs to be used. And the only person that I've read in the paper about them calling to Nebraska to talk about conservation was a guy from Colorado, not a person from Nebraska, to talk about birds. And that came out of the mountain lion conservation money, which I think is somewhat over $200,000. I think it's probably the best-selling plate that the state has. So I'm going to do some checking about the ways that they have spent that money and want it documented. But regardless of what they tell me, I would intend to divert it to a different fund where there is more accountability, no slush funding, and that is what I have in mind. But before attempting to do it, I intend to talk to the Speaker, and this serves a second purpose. How would you all feel if on almost every bill that comes up, I have something to say, then because the bill is the Speaker's bill, I sit silent as the Rock of Gibraltar? So I put what I want into the record, and I will pursue it other than on the mic. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Chambers, for speaking on this bill and the mountain lion. I actually have the mountain lion license plates and thought the money was going towards something else. So I appreciate the transparency of that. And I encourage everyone to support the committee amendment and the Senator Friesen's amendment and this bill because it does do a lot in the way of cleaning up the process of how we do license plates in Nebraska. And I appreciate the committee's work on this. And I just encourage everyone to support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Kavanaugh. I see no further discussion on the amendment. Senator Friesen, you recognize to close on AM 1167. It waives closing. Question for the body's adoption of AM 1167. Those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
36 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the amendment.
AM 1167 is adopted. For the discussion on LB 356 and the pending committee amendment. I see none. Senator Friesen waives closing on the committee amendment. Those in favor of the committee amendment, AM 731, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
37 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the committee amendment.
Committee amendment's adopted. I see no further discussion on the bill as amended. Speaker Scheer waives closed. The request for the body is the advance of LB 356 to ENR initial. Those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
37 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill.
LB 356 advances. Our next speaker priority bill is LB 6. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 6, introduced by Senator Blood, is a bill for an act relating to post-secondary education, changes residency requirements for persons on active duty and their dependents, and repeals the original section. The bill is read for the first time on January 10th of this year and referred to the Education Committee. That committee reports the bill to general file with committee amendments.
Senator Blood, you recognized to open on LB 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, today I rise to bring forward LB 6, which allows a dependent of an active duty member of the armed forces who is assigned to duty out of state and has received a letter of acceptance from a Nebraska college to be deemed an in-state resident for purposes of determining tuition and fees as long as the dependent remains continuously enrolled in the institution of higher learning. I thank the Speaker for making this bill one of his priority bills this year. As you all probably know, the cost of going to college continues to grow, and those prices are even more prohibitive if you're talking about paying to go to someplace outside of your home state. Oftentimes, out-of-state tuition can be 2 to 3 times more than in-state rates. A change in status before enrollment places that student in a situation where they must then find another college at the last minute. May I get the gavel, please? At the last minute or pay higher tuition. If you've ever talked to me about our military members, you know that I truly believe that the family also serves. The families are asked to move across the country at a moment's notice, usually every 2 to 3 years. They don't have any more say in the matter than the service member. It can be a burden, especially when we're talking about children. The children really have no choice. I believe it is our responsibility to try and lighten that burden. It is an obvious stressor that grows when your child is planning on attending college in a great place like Nebraska, only to find out that the cost to attend the school has suddenly increased because they won't be a resident when it's time to enroll. We can make it easier for them by allowing the in-state tuition rate as long as they are stationed here when they receive the acceptance letter. They will then get to keep that in-state rate if continuously enrolled, even if their family has long since moved to another state or 2. Currently, there are at least 5 other states that have adopted this type of legislation: California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Virginia. And it's my guess that you're going to see plenty more in the next few years, as this is really about fairness to the students who are placed in a situation that they really can't control. This issue is also one of the key personnel and readiness issues meant to support our service members and their families that are put forward each year by the Department of Defense. Should we pass LB 6 this year, Nebraska will have met all 10 requests from the DoD, either through legislation or by working behind the scenes to change existing policy. When it comes to our military families, Nebraska has done an excellent job of joining together in bipartisan unity to protect our state's #1 employer and its highly educated workforce that we hope will choose to retire in Nebraska, where they will live, work, play, and pay taxes. I will add that while the community colleges had originally submitted a fiscal note that said it would cost them as much as $36,000, they have since looked at the issue again, have submitted a new fiscal note reflecting a minimal impact. This new fiscal note will be reflected once the bill goes to select file. With that said, the Education Committee does have an amendment, AM 381, that cleans up some of the language in the bill to make it a bit more clear, and I fully support that amendment and previously met with Senator Groney on that amendment. I hope that you will vote green on the amendment and green on LB 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blood. As the clerk indicated, there are amendments from the Education Committee. Senator Groney recognized to open on AM 381, committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I applaud Senator Blood for checking off all 10 of those. She's worked long, hard on those 10 requests from DOD. And this is her shining moment, I guess, number 10. When committee counsel looked over the bill, they seen some redundancy that Bill Writing had done. Active duty soldiers already by federal law and our state statute do have in-state tuition, and it follows them when they become a veteran. So what we basically did with the amendment was remove that so it wasn't redundant in our state statutes, and to clarify the real intent by Senator Blood to extend those benefits to the spouses and dependents. It makes for better reading and clears up the statutes, and it does what Senator Blood intended Bill Writing to do in the first place. So I'd appreciate a green vote on AM 381 and LB 6.
Thank you, Senator Groney. Debate is now open. LB 6 and the pending committee amendments. Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of LB 6 and the committee amendments, and I want to commend Senator Blood for her work on this issue and so many other issues dealing with our military families. It's an honor to have our military families in our state while their families are serving here, and this bill is an important step to make sure that if the family has to be relocated, that the student still is able to stay enrolled in our wonderful institutions of higher learning. And it's an important step to make sure that we're serving those families that serve all of us. And I also want to commend Senator Blood for her work on meeting the requests of the Department of Defense. This is one of our biggest employers and a huge economic impact on the state. And so being attentive to their concerns is important to not only being a good host for those military families, but also being attentive to our economic development concerns as well. And so I thank her for her hard work on those issues for military families and urge your support of LB 6 and AM 381. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Crawford. Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the legislature, my seatmate, Senator Blood. I, as a volunteer and recipient of an honorable discharge from the Army, I think it's only appropriate in view of how much Senator Blood has done for the military families and the concept of the military that there should be an honorary induction service making her a member of the military. I really do appreciate it. She has been consistent ever since she has been here. She has raised issues that I didn't even know were issues. It's even done to a greater extent here than I've seen the congressional delegation do, so I'm appreciative of what she has done. And I hope that a day will come. I'm going to digress. This morning, I said I'm going to be an itch you cannot scratch based on the issues that I intend to bring up throughout the session from time to time. There is an itch I have that I cannot scratch, and it's based on the idea that there have been people who did everything they could to avoid entering military service, including the president. When I went in, there were a lot of people fleeing to Canada, which I never would have thought about doing. I wasn't aware of how many ways had been formulated for draft evasion and dodging by the so-called better classes. But the itch I cannot scratch is the insult paid not only to the ones affected by it, but by all those who've served. And I don't have any war stories. I didn't go overseas. Nobody shot at me. I didn't shoot at anybody. I didn't get an Article 15. I was not court-martialed. None of that. I just went in and did what I had to do to get it out of the way. But when the president determined that transgender people were unfit to be in this military, I was extremely offended by that action. They volunteered. They were willing to assume an onerous task that many of the better people would not consider for a moment doing. Some are even fighting in court to retain the right, as they call it, to serve in the military, whereas others consider it a burden. So when that injustice is corrected, when the harm done to those people, the insult visited upon them will be erased, then a part of me can rest, which at this point cannot. I will not speak on this particular subject on every bill that comes up relative to the military, but this was the time, this was the place, this was the day. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator LaGrone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of LB 6, and I too want to thank Senator Blood for bringing the bill. I do want to echo Senator Crawford's comments about exactly how important OFIT and military is to Nebraska, but especially to Sarpy County. And I really think that it's important that we do whatever we can to make sure that our military members, including their families, have what they need to make Nebraska a great place to live for them. I think that keeping them here is a great thing that we can do, not only for those values that we hold dear and supporting them, but also for our workforce development issues. So again, I just want to reiterate that I too support the bill and thank Senator Blood for bringing that. With that, I yield the remainder of my time to Senator Arch.
Thank you, Senator LaGrone. Senator Arch, 1 minute. 2:30.
Thank you, Senator LaGrone. I was just reflecting on the progress that has been made in identifying these 10 things from the Department of Defense, and prior to meeting in session today, Senator Blood and I had a conversation as well, because we know that there's more to do, and in particular as it relates to retirees. We want to see the retirees stay in the state of Nebraska, not live in Iowa and commute to Nebraska. So we have more work to do, but I congratulate Senator Blood on this bill.
Thanks, Senator Arch. Senator Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, it was twofold. First, to thanks Senator Blood, because she's put a lot of work in, not just on this, but all veterans issues. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say that AM 361 and LB 6 are just yeoman's work when it comes to making sure that when the government puts enough red tape in front of you, sometimes it just becomes almost daunting to try and get through it, and she's done it. But with that said, and I wouldn't do this, but since he got on the mic, some of you may have got a copy of Senator Chambers' honorable discharge, part of his official records, but you may not have taken the time to read the letter, and I think it's probably fitting now, especially with the comments he just made. This letter is from his commanding officer of Delta Company, 1st Battle Group, 1st Brigade, 1st Training Brigade, Fort Ord, California, which no longer exists. The date is 5 November 1959, so 60 years ago. Subject, Private Ernest W. Chambers. 2, Commanding Officer, Company E, 2nd Battalion, 355th Infantry. So it's to the company commander of the company that he's going to from the company that he's leaving. On September 15th, 1959, Private Ernest W. Chambers joined this company to complete his 8 weeks of infantry training. From the first day of the training, he has proven himself to be an outstanding soldier. This soldier has continually demonstrated outstanding character. He has demonstrated a willingness to learn and to get the job done. which is in keeping with the highest standards of military service. During his second 8 weeks of infantry training, this company has been extremely fortunate to be able to have him as a soldier, Private Chambers caliber, and as he graduates, we are indeed sorry to see this young man leave, but at the same time, we're happy to have him go on to his next unit. It is a well-known fact in this company that Private Chambers does, when Private Chambers does something, he gives it 100% of his mental and physical energies. This attitude towards military life is indeed most compatible. I highly recommend promotion of this soldier and would do it myself if he continued in this position. Signed, Marshall A. Broderick, Captain, Commanding Infantry. So anyway, because he never gets the credit that he's due, I thought you should read that letter of commendation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Is there any further discussion on LB 6 or the pending committee amendment? I see none. Senator Groen, you recognize to close on committee amendment. Your waves closed, and the question for the body is the adoption of AM 381 committee amendment. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
36 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the committee amendment.
AM 381 committee amendment is adopted. For the discussion on LB 6 as amended. I see none. Senator Blood, you recognize to close in the advance of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleagues for the statements of affection. When I say friends all, I know that that is often the brunt of many a joke, but I sincerely mean it when I say friends all. And I truly believe in my heart that when it comes to our military families, there is not much better bipartisan policy that we can all rally behind than our military families and our veterans. And so I thank you for the kind and surprising words, and I thank you in advance for your green votes.
Thank you, Senator Blood. The question for the body's advance of LB 60 in our initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
40 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill.
LB 6 advances. Proceeding to the next speaker priority bill, LB 524. Mr. Clerk.
Legislative Bill 524, introduced by Senator Dorn, is a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Budget Act, changes provisions relating to annexations, harmonized provisions, and repeals the original section. The bill was read for the first time on January 22nd of this year, and it was referred to the Government, Military, and Veteran Affairs Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with no committee amendments.
Senator Dorn, you're recognized to open on LB 524.
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome, colleagues. LB 524 is a bill intended to move the deadline for annexations to be reported to the county assessor so that the changes in boundary lines can be included in the valuation that is certified to taxing entities. Currently, real and personal property annexed by a political subdivision on or after August 1st is considered within the taxable valuation of the affected subdivision in the following year. Annexations occurring before August 1st are included within the valuations assessors certify to the taxing entities on or before August 20th. This 20-day period provides very little time for assessors to recalculate the new valuations following an annexation and to certify it to the affected entities.
LB 524 would change the reporting deadline to on or before June 20th and set out the process for annexing entities to provide notice to the county. Annexations reported after that day would be included in the following year's valuations. NACO worked with the City of Omaha to carve out an exception for cities of the metropolitan class. Omaha asked to keep their reporting date the same. This appears in the white copy that is white copy amendment AM 332 to replace the green copy. The amendment borrows language from section 18-3301 requirements about how municipalities give notice to county officials of annexations to make the notice process clearer in this section. I would be glad to answer any questions. Part of why this bill now has the white copy of the 332 amendment is that in government, as it was coming out of there and everything, this amendment was not originally included. So we brought this about through the process of a speaker bill, and at that time then this amendment has become part of that, and now the bill is the 332.
Thank you, Senator Dorn. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Dorn would move to amend LB 524 with AM 332.
Senator Dorn, you're recognized to open on AM 332.
Thank you again, Mr. President. I guess I included a lot of those comments in my original comments, and yes, Omaha had asked to keep their August 1st date the same. That was something they had very much been used to and they'd used all the time, and they just felt for them it was something that they would like to do. So that was why we did add the amendment, and that's why it's being brought in this fashion.
Thanks, Senator Dorn. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Wayne has a motion, floor amendment 39. I have a note here that the senator indicates that he wants to withdraw that amendment.
The floor amendment is withdrawn. Debate is now open on LB 524 and the pending amendment AM 332. Is there any discussion on the bill or the amendment to the bill? I do not see any discussion. Senator Dorn, you recognize close on the amendment first. He waives closing. Question for the body is the adoption of AM 332. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
37 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the amendment.
AM 332 is adopted. Further discussion on LB 524 as amended. Senator Clements.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had one question for Senator Dorn.
Senator Dorn, yield to questions, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Dorn. You said that Omaha wanted to leave their date the same, but I see this affects county assessors. What is it, the whole of Douglas County, or is it just cities of the metropolitan class, or other cities in Douglas County affected?
This amendment is for the City of Omaha, that metropolitan.
Oh, it's all right. So the county assessor would just report differently for the City of Omaha, but for the rest of the county entities differently?
No, this bill is for when someone annexes a property. So when the City of Omaha annexes a property, whatever county that is in, they wanted their date left August 1st.
Okay, that's for city, all right, city taxes. I don't suppose the other cities in the Douglas County are going to be annexing then, are they?
Well,
all right,
I don't know up to that I don't know for sure, but this was brought by NACO and the county organization because there have been issues where cities they've annexed, even though it's been public record when you go through the annexation process, it doesn't always get relayed to the county assessor. They may see the legal notice, but they don't see the fact that it was definitely annexed. This bill also includes in there then that it's the part of the city to report that to the county officials on by that date. This June 30th date then is telling those cities, if you do not report by June 30th, we are not going to include it in the valuation for that year. It will be in the next one. Omaha wanted their date, which they're used to having August 1st, they came forward and requested to be left as August 1st. So that's why we made this amendment and worked that out so that they still could be August 1st.
But it was something that other county assessors or some county assessors had a problem with? Was it?
Some county assessors and some cities coordinating when a property was annexed. Because if they turned it in by August 1st, by August 20th, county assessors have to give their certification to the county board so that now by the process they have to go through, they can approve their budget for the next year based on those valuations and have it up to the state by September 25th. They were having issues with those 20 days in coordinating all of that.
Okay, so now it's from June 1st to August 20th that
It's
they have.
June 30th.
June 30th
Yes.
to August 20th.
20th.
And all of July.
So now it
Okay.
gives them an extra 30 days. Some of the counties, or all the counties except the part that make up metropolitan Omaha.
All right. Thank you. I just hadn't seen this bill before. I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah.
That's fine with me. I'll support LB 524.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Clements and Dorn. Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Senator Clements brought to mind a question that I have come to mind after he said that. Senator Dorn, will you yield to a question?
Senator Dorn, yield, please.
Yes, I will.
Senator Dorn, so I believe what you said in your opening statements, this was going to be an opportunity so the county assessor didn't have to work in that short 20-day window. Is that correct?
That is part of this bill, yes. Now they have an opportunity that they aren't squeezed into the 20 days to get that part done.
So tell me, how does that work with the Douglas County assessor then if the metropolitan city of Omaha is excluded? Doesn't that assessor still have to work within that 20-day window?
Yes, they still are the August 1st instead of the June 30th. That was the request that they brought forward, though.
So if it's good enough for Douglas County to work under that 20-day window, why isn't it good enough for all of them?
NACO brought this forward because there had been an issue in certain entities, certain cities, certain municipalities, that this was not working the way county assessors wanted it to work. They were the ones that brought that forward.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why, other than that, the extra 30 days will help them. I don't know why Douglas County wanted to leave there specifically at August 1st.
I guess it would seem to reason if Douglas County, being the largest county, has figured out a way to do it in 20 days, everybody else should be able to figure that out as well. I'm having trouble understanding why you want to separate out Douglas County or Omaha from all the rest when in fact they maybe have more of an annex problem or issue than any other city in the state. So this is peculiar why you would carve out one of the biggest county with the most probable annexations, and they can get it done in the 20 days, but everybody else can't. Does that make any sense?
I understand where you're coming from. When they explained it to us, their computer systems, everything they have set up, their people are on that timetable. They didn't want to change that timetable. That system that they have, and I don't know how that part works other than I can tell you how Gage County works. Let me tell you, Gage County needs the additional 30 days so that they can coordinate everything. City of Omaha felt comfortable. They felt they did not want to change that date. They wanted to keep their date the same. Originally, they were also going to be on the June 30th date.
Okay.
They came forward to me, to us, NACO, and requested that they be put on their own schedule.
I'm having a little trouble understanding why the city of Omaha has an issue or is in this whole discussion about what the county assessor does. That's a little peculiar for me.
I don't have a good answer for you. What I can do is between now and second round, I will get you an answer.
Okay.
I see what the question is, and I see why Senator Clemens brought the question.
I understand.
I do not have an answer for you today, though.
I understand why Omaha wants to do that. I do, because they get that revenue in advance so they know what to budget for. I get that. The point I'm trying to make is if Douglas County assessing can figure out how to do it, all the other counties ought to be able to figure it out as well. That's my comment. Thank you.
Yep. I will have an answer for you between now and the second round. Yes.
Thank you, Senator Urban and Senator Dorn. I see no further discussion of the bill. Senator Dorn, you're recognized to close on the advance of the bill to E&R initial. Those he waives closed. And the question for the body is the advance of LB 5240 E&R initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
37 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill.
LB 524 advances. Proceeding on the agenda, General File 2019 Committee Priority Bills, LB 428. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 428, introduced by Senator Friesen, is a bill for an act relating to the employment security law, changes provisions relating to eligibility for benefits and repeals the original section. The bill was read for the first time on January 18th of this year and referred to the Business and Labor Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments.
Senator Friesen, you recognized to open LB 428.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the body. LB 428 resolves an issue affecting our highway construction workforce. As you might suspect, Nebraska's weather conditions only allow roads and bridges to be built during part of the year, typically April through the middle of November. During that time period, Nebraska's highway contractors are employing thousands of Nebraskans. However, when the projects finish in November, there is not enough other work to keep many of the employees busy. So many employees are laid off over the winter. But contractors cannot afford to lose this skilled workforce to other jobs or other states with warmer weather. So they do something called attachment. This allows the employee to receive unemployment benefits for that period of time when the employer has no work, but then be scheduled to return to work when the spring comes and road construction season begins. An issue arose this winter when our State Department of Labor announced that they were going to shorten the attachment period to just 8 weeks. This became a major problem for highway contractors because the construction off-season is far longer than 8 weeks. I should note here that the construction season is set by our Department of Transportation. Contractors are not permitted to work projects outside of that season. The change, announced by the Department of Labor, resulted in ongoing conversations with the industry, the governor's office, and the two departments. Since the introduction of LB 428, conversations have been productive, and the result of their work is contained in the committee amendment. It proposes to maintain the longer attachment for the highway construction workers while at the same time increasing the contributions into the unemployment fund that those employers would make. It increases contributions by expanding the wage base to $24,000 that these employers would contribute to unemployment insurance premiums on. I want to emphasize that the amendment is drafted to only impact a very small number of employers, and it should take care of the fiscal impact associated with the original versions of LB 428. LB 428 was advanced from Business and Labor Committee with no dissenting votes and was designated as one of the committee priority bills. I ask your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. As the clerk indicated, there are amendments from Business and Labor Committee. Senator Matt Hansen, as chair of the committee, recognized to open on AM 758 committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, colleagues. As Senator Friesen recognized, this is one of the two Business and Labor Committee priorities, and I thank him for allowing me to designate it as a committee priority bill. It is one of two bills, and thus a combination of two bills we heard in committee this year dealing with employment security law. AM 758 is a white copy amendment to the bill. The amendment does two things. First, it incorporates changes suggested by the Department of Labor to Senator Friesen's LB 428 to address concerns they had with the green copy. Those provisions are included in Section 2 of the amendment. It addresses the concerns about conformity with federal law that the Department of Labor had with the green copy. These changes will address the fiscal note, eliminating the department's estimated loss of federal funds in the green copy. With the adoption of the amendment, the department estimates no adverse fiscal impact to the state. Second, AM 578 incorporates provisions in Senator Crawford's Bill LB 306. LB 306 was debated by the legislature earlier this year and is in the same section of statute as the topic of Senator Friesen's bill. If you recall, LB 306 created a category of good cause for leaving employment in order to care for a family member with a serious health condition under Nebraska employment security law. An individual still must meet all work search requirements and other obligations to qualify for unemployment insurance. The only change here for 306 is from the amendment is it removes the term domestic partner from the bill. From my understanding, the concerns with LB 306 were related to the definition of that term in terms of family member. With these changes, LB 428 was advanced unanimously from the committee with one senator absent. I would urge your adoption of AM 758 and the advancement of LB 428. And thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, I have a motion here by Senator Wayne with an indication that he wishes to withdraw that amendment, or that motion.
The motion is withdrawn. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Debate is now open on LB 428 on the pending Business and Labor Committee amendment. Senator Mosier.
I just wanted to repeat my discussion that we had when this bill was heard earlier in the session, that unemployment insurance should be for unemployment when the employer has to terminate or lay off people to cover them until they get their next job. To put in an exclusion to allow them to get unemployment right away when they quit to take care of a family member. It's a laudable goal, but it's a social service kind of provision that I think should be handled in some other way than the unemployment fund. By allowing people to selectively take care of ill family members, and they're going to draw the pool down, and then the insurance premiums that are charged to all employers are going to have to increase to cover this pool of employees. So I was opposed to this earlier, and I still oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Mosier. Senator LeGrone, excuse me. Did you wave off, Senator? Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. So Senator Moser alluded to some of my same concerns. I think this bill, if I remember correctly, was 306, and if I remember right, that bill came up on final reading, so it had 2 opportunities for discussion on the floor, and that was several hours spent discussing 306, and the vote was to not advance 306 for many of the same reasons that Senator Moser spoke about. And I am not in support of taking unemployment money or funds to give to people to take off to take care of their loved ones. I understand that's important. I understand that care is needed, but I don't believe that this is the approach we should take. I guess I should say I'm not surprised that it came out as a committee amendment, but I'm not in favor of 758, and if it gets that far, I will not be in favor of 428 as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Erdman. Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make 2 clarifications. One, I want to emphasize and clarify that this is unemployment insurance, and it operates just like unemployment insurance. It just adds another reason that you can leave for good cause. It is not for a leave that you can then take care of your family member and come back to that same job. This is only if you must leave your current employer after you've made all reasonable attempts to make accommodations. You must leave your current employer and you are actively seeking another job and seeking employment that allows you to accommodate that family caregiving. It is not to just take off work and take care of a family member. So I just wanted to clarify that. The other is that it is amended from the previous version by taking out some language that a few people commented to me. There was a concern that they had in terms of why they were unable to vote for it on final reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Crawford. Senator Ben Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Some of you may have known when I first got up here and spoke about 306 that I was against it for a specific reason, that the terminology in the bill was, they gave certain criteria about why you can leave your job to help take care of certain family members, and one of the family member terminologies on there was domestic partner. And I thought that was kind of a vague term that really wasn't defined in the statute or anywhere else, in my opinion. And so that was one of the reasons I voted against it, and I came up on the floor and even said that. And so I do applaud Senator Crawford for removing that terminology from the bill, and I will vote yes on AM 758 this time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Is there further discussion? Yes, there is. Senator Mosier.
Just one other comment. I probably wasn't completely plain when I spoke before. When you add another coverage to an insurance policy, you're going to increase the premiums. Your premiums are set based on your experience and your losses. And in a typical insurance policy, there would be overhead and other items added to the insurance. In the case of unemployment insurance, I don't know if there's any markup or overhead or commissions or anything paid. But the fees that are charged to the various employers, which are based on their experience, and then some by their category, what category they're listed in. Some categories are more likely to have swings where they unemploy someone. And so then when now coming forward, we're going to add another coverage, it has to cost something. There's no free lunch. And what's going to happen is that the insurance rates that you charge all these businesses to add this extra coverage is going to raise their costs in unemployment insurance. So that was my point. It's another cost to business. It's a laudable goal to try to help people, I agree, but businesses have to be profitable in order to make a profit, to pay the tax, to make everything else we do work. So that was just my point. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Mosier. Speaker Scheer.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I rise, as I did the first time on 306. I do oppose it simply because of the funding mechanism, not because I don't think it's a laudable process to have, but as Senator Mosier has pointed out, these are funds that are derived by business interests that provide those to the state of Nebraska for the protection of their employees when they are terminated or when the business closes or other specific events that allow them to draw up against that. Senator Crawford was good in drafting the bill. There is a potential during normal unemployment that if you have employees that are fired or that are terminated, have the ability to go back against the individual business's funds. And if that happens on a frequent enough basis, that entity is surcharged on its rate based on how often that happens. I could be fully supportive of this if it was funded through perhaps Health and Human Services or some other state funding mechanism that everyone was paying the cost of this service, because I think it generally will be available to every person within the state of Nebraska. By and large, we are at 98% employment if we believe the 2% unemployment. So literally everyone that has a job would be covered by this. And it seems to me that it shouldn't be a business expense that we're drawing against. It should be some type of a social coverage for those that cannot afford the loss of the income during that time that they have to take care of a loved one in whichever relationship that might be. So I think it is a laudable process. I think it has merit, but my only complaint with the bill is essentially, and still is, the manner in which it is funded using unemployment insurance proceeds rather than finding some way for the state to fund that through either an income or sales tax, where all people would be invested in covering those costs of the individuals utilizing this procedure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Groney.
Thank you, Mr. President. As when 306 came up, I stand against AM 758, which for the same reasons, some with what Senator Sheard said, 306 was dead, and now it's being brought back through an amendment with some good changes, as Senator Hansen said, plus I understand now you have to attempt to work with your employer before you leave to address the issue, and also I believe you have to go out and once you take the unemployment, you have to follow the same process of trying to find another job while you're receiving it. But the point is this, and which I said in 306, we have the best unemployment rates for business in the nation. It is one of the bright spots, probably the only bright spot that we have to offer businesses when they come to this state or when they want to build high-risk workman comp situations of their employees. That's a huge tax. And if we can alleviate that by keeping us the lowest in the nation, we just can't keep chipping it away with a little bit here and a little bit there. I happen to believe this is unnecessary. There's other measures, other ways to handle this situation. That's what family is all about. But this is unnecessary, and I really don't like the way this is being done, attaching it to another bill when it was already defeated by this body in a short. Here we are debating the same issue in a limited amount of time when other folks' priority bills are yet to come up, and we're debating somebody's priority bill twice because they didn't give up. And it's going to happen again, and it's happened in the past. But I guess we can do it, so we do it. It's just that some people do these things softly and some do it loudly. And but it's the same results. It's a way into getting things done, and if it works, I guess you do it. But it does affect our rates to our businesses, which, as I said, is the one huge bright spot that we have to attract businesses to the state, is our unemployment rates. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Groney. Senator Albright.
Thank you, President Foley. I, too, rise in opposition of AM 758. I'd just like to talk about some of the impacts. To be eligible for unemployment insurance benefits, an individual must meet each of the 3 distinct criteria to draw benefits. Failing to meet any one of the criteria renders the individual ineligible for benefits. Number 1, if he or she must have earned at least $4,246 in base period wages, at least $1,850 of which was earned in one quarter and $800 in another quarter of the base period. Number 2, if he or she must be able and available for work. In order to be able and available for work, 3 things. The claimant must be physically able to work, actively seeking work, available to immediately accept new work. Number 3, he or she must have separated from work under non-disqualifying conditions. A, the employee must be discharged for misconduct, must sit out for a 14-week disqualification period. B, individuals who quit without good cause must requalify for benefits by earning wages in covered employment equal to 4 times their weekly benefit amount and separate from that subsequent employment under disqualifying conditions, LB 203 in 2017. The requalification requirement prohibits individuals from quitting employment to draw unemployment benefits. LB 306 removes the requalification requirement for individuals who quit their employment to care for a family member, but does not remove the able and available requirement. An LB 306 claimant attempting to draw benefits must be actively seeking work in order to draw the benefits. Even if LB 306 claimant is actively seeking work, if the individual had to quit his or her employment to care for an elderly parent, it's hard to see how he or she would be available to accept new work. Current law, John Doe works for ABC Company. He has a sick mother and needs to be able to provide care for her. John Doe tries to work with ABC Company, but they are unable to come up with a schedule that will allow John Doe the time he needs to care for his mother. John Doe quits his job with ABC Company on January 1st, 2019. John Doe files for unemployment insurance benefits on January 2nd, 2019. The Nebraska Department of Labor adjudicates John Doe's claim, finds that his reasons for leaving his employment with ABC Company do not constitute good cause, as defined in the Nebraska Statute 48-628-13. John Doe is determined ineligible for the unemployment insurance benefits until he returns to work, earns wages in insured work totaling at least 4 times his weekly benefit amount, and separates from his most recent employment under a non-disqualifying condition. John Doe provides care for his mother for 8 weeks. After his care is no longer needed on a full-time basis, he begins to look for a new job. John Doe is not eligible for unemployment benefits during this time while searching for work because he did not have a subsequent covered employment at which he earned wages. LB 306, another example. John Doe works at ABC Company. He has a sick mother and needs to be able to provide care. Works for the company, but they are unable to come up with the schedule again, allowing him to take time to care for his mother. He quits his job on January 1st, again, 2019, files for unemployment insurance. The department adjudicates him, John Doe claim again, and finds that his reasons for leaving the company constitutes good cause and defined in LB 306. John Doe meets his initial eligibility requirements for unemployment insurance benefits. He files his first weekly claim for benefits on January 9th during the online weekly certification process. He asks, were you available for 4 or more days during the week to accept a job that's offered? You're considered available for work if you're appearing for duty in any court under law issued summons. And he also asks, did you refuse an offer to work or a referral to the job? Finally, he must meet the weekly work search requirements, which require him to take at least 5 contacts with employers to apply for at least 1 job per week. John Doe is unavailable for work on the 4th and for 4 or more days during the week because he is providing full-time care to his mother. Because he's unavailable for work, he's not eligible for the benefits that week. John Doe provides care for his mother for 8 weeks. John Doe is not eligible for unemployment benefits during this time. After his care is no longer needed on a full-time basis, John Doe begins to look for a new job. He's now available for work, does not need to refuse a job, and meets the weekly work requirements. Because 306 removed the requalification requirement, he now meets the weekly eligibility requirements. I can go on and on with this, but I just want you to know that this will affect the employee and the employer. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Albright. Senator Coltman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise in support of AM 758 as well as LB 428. I'm rising more than anything to dispute a statement that was just made on the floor of this legislature, that unemployment rates are the only bright spot in this state to attract businesses. I think that's nonsense. I could count on both my hands and both my feet and many other places that there's plenty of bright spots. So to stand on this floor and say that unemployment rates are a bright spot, the only bright spot that we have in this state to attract businesses, is utter nonsense. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. Senator Urban.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I listened to what Senator Albright had commented about the requirements for unemployment, and I was wondering if she would yield to a question.
Senator Crawford, would you, please?
Senator Albright.
I'm sorry, Senator Albright, would you?
Yes.
Senator Albright, you read the requirements for unemployment insurance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in that description that you gave, they had to earn like $4,256 and then $1,800 and a quarter, whatever the requirements were.
Mm-hmm.
So 306 or Amendment 758 supersedes those requirements? Is that what you were saying?
Well, I believe you'd probably have to ask Senator Crawford. I don't know how she modeled her new bill or 306.
Okay. Well, when I listened to what you said, so if John Doe or whoever you were referring to made application for unemployment and he was denied, what he would need to do is find a sick relative to take care of, and then he would be eligible for unemployment insurance even if his other criteria wasn't met. I'm having a tough time understanding that we already have provisions put in place what you must do to qualify for that, and then 306 circumvents that by giving us something else that we can qualify by. That seems to be an issue. Would that be something that makes sense to what, is my question making sense?
Well, I did list out the things that they have to do right now to be able to take care of the obligation they have to the state or to the federal government that they're going to get these funds from. There are things that they have to do today to make that work.
So then in 306, if you understand it as best you do, and I'm trying to get my hands around it, those three requirements would not have to be met for someone to take time off to take care of a sick relative.
I think you might want to ask Senator Crawford because I didn't draft her bill.
Okay, well, maybe I would. Is Senator Crawford yield to a question?
Senator Crawford, yield, please.
Yes, thank you.
Did you hear the discussion with Senator
I did hear
Albrecht?
your discussion, and actually the Amendment 758 does not take away any of those requirements that are in current unemployment law. You still must be seeking work, you still must take work that is offered, and you must be meeting all those requirements that are currently laid out for everyone else. There's no exception to the requirements for this. All this is that it allows you to leave with good cause, which means that you can get unemployment insurance if you meet those high standards that we set in our state for qualifying for unemployment insurance. It just means you can do that immediately as long as you meet those high standards.
So I think one of those requirements was to be able to take immediate work. Would that be true?
That is true.
So if you're taking time off to take care of a sick relative, how would you be able to meet that requirement?
Well, a great example is the one that Senator Lathrop talked about on our first debate, and that was, let's say you have a job that requires frequent travel, and there just isn't a way that your employer can accommodate that. But you could take another job and still take care of your mother check in with your mother on a nursing home each night if you work during the day, but you can't do that with your current travel. So that would be an example. You still have to be able to work. So this is not taking time off work just to care for family. It's that you have to leave one job to get another job that allows you to take care of your family member, and you have to meet all of the existing requirements in unemployment insurance.
So then if one took another job with another employer, why would you need unemployment insurance if you have a job?
You only need it while you're searching for that job until you get that job.
I see.
So you shouldn't be on it for very long, especially with our low unemployment rate.
Okay. Well, I may be more confused now than when I started. Thank you for answering.
Thank you, Senator Urban and Senator Crawford. Senator Crawford, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did just want to emphasize, Senator Albright did lay out those strict requirements we have for qualifying for unemployment insurance in our state, and anyone who leaves for good cause because they must take care of a family member must still meet all of those requirements. So this is, you are leaving one job because you have not been able to get accommodations, although you've worked to provide accommodations, and you must take a different job. And this unemployment insurance would just help you in that bridge between having to leave your one job and starting your next job. You must be seeking employment. You must take employment that's offered. You have to meet all of those other requirements of unemployment insurance. So expect this to be a pretty small number of people who meet those requirements. And so don't expect it to be much of a burden at all on the current unemployment pool. And also want to clarify, it does not count against your employer. This goes to the general pool, not to your employer. So it is a small blip, and I do not think it will impact the pool very substantially, because it will be a small number of people who meet these criteria, that they need to take care of a family member, but they still can work and are willing to take any job coming up. And it's only for that window from when they leave their first job to taking that next job. And again, in Nebraska, we're very strict with people on unemployment insurance, and so you must meet those strict standards. And in that window between when you have to quit one job and your next job begins, that's the only time you're receiving this, and only receiving unemployment insurance, and only if you meet all the other requirements for unemployment insurance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Crawford. Senator LeGrone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Moser yield to a question?
Senator Moser, yield, please.
Yes, I would.
Senator Moser, does your business have much experience with this process?
Yes, we do. We collect and pay unemployment insurance premiums on all our employees.
So could you kind of walk me through how that process works?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be the absolute expert of every example, but I can tell you in our situation how it works. So the state looks at your payroll and they look at what classification your employees are in, and then they assign, I think, an initial rate, and then you pay that percentage times a certain portion of your wage that you pay all your employees, and it goes into this unemployment fund, and they keep track of it by employer. So my experience is separate from other retailers or from other types of businesses. And then at the end of the year, they send out a report that shows what you paid in premiums, and if you had any claims that were charged against those premiums, it's shown. And then it shows what your balance is. And based on what your balance is, the ratio of that balance versus the total wage that you're paying the premium on indicates what your future premiums are. So I think, you know, I'm not the underwriter who set this up, but typically the actuary actually would look at what you're trying to insure, and they try to predict the likelihood that you're going to have a loss, so they know how to set the premiums. And then the underwriters look at the class of people that you're trying to insure, and they decide whether the people who are going to be allowed to purchase this insurance fit the category that the actuary actually studied to make sure that the premium is the right premium. Because if your actuary says we're going to insure, say, drivers 40 to 60 years old, and then you allow teenage drivers who may not have as much experience in driving and may be more likely to have accidents, then your rates are going to be wrong. They're going to be too low. So here, when the employer has bad experience, either accidentally or sometimes by virtue of the business you're in, I would imagine, you'd have to ask some of the others that have restaurants and bars and those sorts of businesses, they have a lot more turnover, and I would imagine they probably have more losses on unemployment insurance. But anyway, if your ratios are wrong, then they raise the rate for the next year. And as I understand it, this bill takes the personal responsibility of the employer out so that it doesn't raise their rate only, but it comes out of the general pool. So if the general pool goes negative, then you're either going to have to put general funds in there to boost that up or change the rates on all employers so that you can cover that added expense.
So could you kind of cover that a little more? I guess my question would be, how does this bill affect what you were just explaining?
Well, long story short, I just think that giving another coverage is going to raise the rates globally. So businesses will pay higher rates to cover this new coverage because otherwise their ratios are going to be off or they're going to be negative. Well, again, that's a personal, if we're not going to hold each employer to his own personal experience
1 minute.
For this loss, but the whole pool will go negative or be less than what it needs to be, and you may have to raise rates. That's what I'm worried about.
Okay, thank you, Senator Moser, for that explanation, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senators LeGrone and Moser. Senator Matt Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I did kind of just want to rise and address a few key points, although some of them just got covered on Senator Crawford's last term in the mic. Under LB 306, we are not changing any of the search for work or other requirements for those leaving to take care of family caregiver responsibilities, you would still have to do all the steps that Senator Albright described of applying through with weekly reports of how many job searches, how many interviews, how many applications you've sent out. You would still have to do all of those, and your benefits would cut off as soon as you seek employment. Likewise, to even be eligible, you have to work for a certain amount of time. Beforehand, you have to work a certain amount of hours to earn a certain amount of wages during what's called your base period, as well as you are capped at a certain number of weeks you can be eligible for unemployment insurance for any reason. All of those standards would still apply to all provisions of LB 508, AM 558. That's not changing. So the classic example that we've given a couple times is somebody who, say, has a job as a traveling salesman and can no longer do that job due to caregiver responsibilities, but could work a traditional 9 to 5 in their hometown. It is for that person, for the few weeks ideally that they have a gap in employment, they would be eligible to apply and get some assistance. And this is especially relevant if somebody has a sudden sickness or a sudden onset where the caregiver responsibilities are kind of thrust upon them and they have to make a change quickly. They would be capped at a certain amount for a certain amount of weeks, and they'd have to qualify, and they'd have to submit reports to the Department of Labor like every other person, and the Department of Labor has processes to audit these reports. They'd go through all the steps. So it is really just a continuation of our current unemployment law practices, just to this new group of people who are leaving for good cause. And good cause is generally considered something that is, it's other than being fired or laid off, but it is a circumstance kind of bigger than you oftentimes is what good cause is. We have other ones in terms of leaving, an abuse or fleeing abuse and harassment. Things like that are things that are, you're the employee choosing to leave employment, but it's ultimately for a situation that's not in your control. And that is why caregiver responsibilities fit well in there. And I do want to talk about just kind of the overall discussion. If you look at the fiscal note for LB 306, it's a $400,000 expense, but there's over 50,000 employers who pay into unemployment insurance, and so assuming that $400,000 expense is as accurate, and we won't know until people start drawing on it, has very well likely to be lower. If we're dividing it out, that's dollars an employer. It's $8 an employer. In terms of having rates spike or whatnot, I don't think an amount of $8 an employer is going to cause rates spike, particularly when our current unemployment funds are actually very high at the moment. I'll remind everybody, we had a previous bill that was mine of LB 359 that we passed earlier this year that actually gave the Department of Labor extra authority to lower the state's yield factor, to lower unemployment insurance taxes in the state of Nebraska because they currently have more money than they need for the foreseeable future. So we have an aggressive cycle when we have a recession to make sure the balance doesn't get too low, and we're going to have now an equally responsive thing when we're in when the employment insurance fund gets built back up to lower taxes on employers. That's something we've already done this year, is to try and make unemployment and taxes lower, and kind of lower by a larger amount than we're talking about here. So I think concerns in terms of causing some sort of rate spike is kind of unwarranted. Just the amount of dollars coming in versus the amount of dollars going out don't line up. I certainly understand if you're on ideological grounds, you're opposing it, but for fiscal grounds, I think those are can be kind of set aside just in terms of looking at the numbers coming in and going out. With that, I would encourage, thank you, Mr. President, I encourage your continued support of AM 758 and LB 428. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Senator Albright.
Thank you again, President Foley. Senator Hansen, can I ask you for a quick question?
Senator Matt Hansen,
Matt Hansen.
please.
Matt? Not Ben.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so looking at AM 758, I was looking for a fiscal note, but the fiscal note that I found was on Senator Friesen's bill, right? For $14,000?
Yes.
So then I went to LB 306, Senator Crawford's other bill, and I found what you had talked about. But so is this fiscal note the correct one that was on January 22nd of 2019?
Yes, for LB 306.
For the $401,748?
Yes.
Okay, so it says in the explanation, as proposed, LB 306 expands the definition of quit for a good cause to include leaving one's employment to care for a family member. Approximately 100 claimants in 2018 stated that they quit their job to care for a family member. The average weekly benefit amount for 2018 was $334.79, and the average claim duration was approximately 12 weeks. The Nebraska Department of Labor anticipates that it will pay out $401,748 for more in unemployment insurance benefits each year. So every year, and my question was, it says trust funds above the total funds. So do these dollars come from the trust fund? Or do they come from
Yes.
the federal government? Is that in a trust fund?
Yes, it's the funds administered by the Department of Labor.
Okay. Again, I just can't wrap my arms around doing something like this, so for that reason, I stand in opposition of AM 758. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Albright and Hansen. Speaker Scheer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Friesen please yield?
Senator Friesen, would you yield to the question, please?
Yes, I would.
Senator Friesen, you and I just had a conversation, and I find it very alarming. So I want to ask you a few questions to make sure I understood correctly. Was there any conditions put on you to get your bill released from the Business and Labor?
Yes.
What was that condition?
My bill would not come out of Business and Labor unless it had the attachment.
So your bill was being held hostage unless you agreed to allow them to put a bill that has already been defeated on the floor on your bill as an amendment. Am I speaking correctly?
That would be correct, I guess, yeah.
And did you also have to specifically agree to vote for this legislation?
Well, I don't remember if I agreed to vote for it, but since they did put a priority designation on it, I would assume I would support it.
Thank you, Mr. Friesen. Senator Friesen. Colleagues, that's very discerning to me. If a bill is good enough to be out of committee, there should not be parameters put on a bill to get it out. If the bill's bad, fair enough, don't bring it out. But if this bill is good enough to be on the floor, it should be brought on the floor without conditions put on it on any perspective. I think that is a problem that this floor should not have to deal with. I appreciate Senator Crawford's zeal for this. I can appreciate perhaps the committee's zeal for this, but there should not be restraints put on a bill in order to have it come out of committee in order for it to be approved. The fact that this bill has already been heard once is somewhat concerning, but again, my biggest concern right now is after hearing that from Senator Friesen, if that's the tactics we're going to use in order to facilitate approval of a bill, we have a problem on this floor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Matt Hansen, you're recognized. Your third opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon again, colleagues. I just rise to, I guess, dispute what has just been said. Members of the Business and Labor Committee will remember that I rescheduled a hearing for AM 428. I'd initially been approved by the lobbying group asking for a late hearing, and then they had rescheduled it for an earlier hearing before the priority bill deadline after we had announced it. So we had rescheduled it. It was our hearing immediately before the priority bill deadline, and I scheduled an executive session for members of the Business and Labor Committee. During that executive session, I had told members of the Business and Labor Committee that it was one of the multiple bills that I had been asked for committee priority, and that I had approached both the lobbying groups and on behalf of them, Senator Friesen, about potentially combining it with Senator Crawford's bill. I will remind you that AM 306 has come out unanimous out of Business and Labor twice. So it's something that I view it as an opportunity for our committee to do some wide and substantial reforms on the issue. At no point in that conversation, at no point in the text and emails and conversations we had, did I make it conditional upon voting it out of committee. I actually went to great lengths, and you can confirm with committee staff great frustration that we had to reschedule a hearing in order to accommodate them by the priority bill deadline. Moving forward, I guess if AM 306 is a deal breaker, I did have conversations with multiple individuals that I would not sink Senator Friesen's bill by attaching a controversial bill to it. It had been my understanding that the votes were there on Senator Crawford's language. If you remember in the initial vote on AM 306, it was a snowy day, and she had multiple people who had committed to vote yes, who were not there in person. Moving forward, hopefully there's a few more lights in the queue, and we can figure out exactly what we need to do with the Business and Labor Committee amendment. But that being said, I just absolutely deny and reject the notion that this was conditional upon me doing something to vote out of another committee, that there were any sort of stipulations to get it out of committee. I told multiple people that I was willing to vote it out, and then we can have an opportunity to discuss whether or not it was ineligible for a committee priority. And I do appreciate Speaker Scheer kind of alerting to the issues of committee chairs holding bills in committee, especially when there's votes in the committee. I do think that's something this body frankly struggles with, and frankly, something I know we've dealt with, or at least allegations of in other committees. So maybe that's a broader conversation for the body. With that, thank you for your time, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hansen. Senator Salama.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a member of the Business and Labor Committee, I was one of the senators who voted this out, but I was unaware of the tactics that were being used at the time for Senator Friesen's bill to be advanced out of committee. So with that, I'd like to see if Senator Friesen would yield to a question.
Senator Friesen, yield, please.
Yes, I would.
Do you have a response to Senator Matt Hansen's assertions on the mic just now, disputing your claim?
I was told that my bill would not come out of committee unless I agreed to it.
Unless you agreed to adding the language of LB 306?
Yes.
Okay.
And since they had removed language, I think with the parties that were representing my bill, I think they were okay with it too.
Mm-hmm. But you were told that unless that language was attached, your bill would not be exec upon?
No, it just wouldn't come out.
It wouldn't come out, okay.
I didn't get into details. They just said if my bill would not come out,
okay,
if I didn't agree to the attachment.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I find that to be very concerning, and that's not the kind of games that I think any of us signed up for when we came to the legislature, and that you could hold a bill in committee until the language of a bill that had died, that we had voted upon, it failed to receive enough votes to advance, was attached to that bill. I find that to be incredibly concerning, and it certainly dims my support of AM 758 and LB 428 if the amendment is adopted. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Salama. Senator Mosier, you're recognized. Your third opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President, and greetings, colleagues. In the intervening time between when I last spoke and now, I surveyed the group of senators to see who here is the best at actuarial questions, and it turns out that Senator Clements has some experience as an actuary, and I was wondering if he would respond to a question.
Senator Clements, yield, please.
Yes.
Okay, and so just very briefly, what does an actuary do? Now you heard my description before, and I'm sure it was paraphrased and maybe not accurate, so would you correct anything that I may have not put in the correct phraseology?
And I think actuary looks at statistics and probabilities of events happening, and now and in many years into the future, and sets a rate to collect to cover all of those payments that have to go out. I worked in life and health insurance, but most insurance, including unemployment insurance, would be that sort of item. You'd look at, estimate how many claims there would be, and take that over the group that has to pay them in and charge a rate for that amount.
So what happens if you add another coverage? What is that going to do to the rate that you would charge to cover those potential losses?
In this situation, if you want, I would see that we're going to have more claims coming in for unemployment, and the amount of those claims is going to have to be paid by someone. I heard that the individual employer wasn't going to be charged, but all employers then out of the fund would have to pay an additional amount to cover the additional costs of those benefits.
So the short answer is the rates would go up?
Yes, rates would go up.
Yeah. And then from my study of insurance way back when, one of the coverages that insurance never wanted to cover is something that the insured can cause himself. In other words, some of these actuarial decisions are based on the likelihood of these events happening without conscious choice. In other words, by accident or by nature of the job that you're doing. So if you allow people to select whether or not they're going to get these benefits, is that also going to increase your loss and maybe make your rates be higher?
Yes, the term we use for that is anti-selection. That we hope that selection is random, and according to general statistics, that people cannot influence. But that is I think it is a risk in this case as well for people to select a situation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senators Mosier and Clements. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Matt Hansen would move to amend AM 758 with Floor Amendment 41.
Senator Matt Hansen, you recognize to open on FA 41.
Good morning, colleagues. I'll be pretty strict and to the point with this. AM 441 strikes the language that is AM 306, LB 306, which was Senator Crawford's bill dealing with unemployment insurance coverage for those leaving for caretaker responsibilities. I've spoken with Senator Crawford, who I think has walked out of the room, and we are okay just removing this from the bill at this time. Hopefully from that perspective, we can just move on, support Senator Friesen's bill, which I will support, and move on to the next bill on the agenda. So with that, I would encourage your votes on all of the amendments, including both my floor amendment and the Business Labor Committee amendment. As I said before, the floor amendment would strike the language of Senator Crawford's LB 306 and would leave just the amended language, the new updated language, to address the fiscal note of LB 428. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hansen. Senator LeGrone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was going to get up to delve into the conversation between Senator Moser and Senator Clements, but with Senator Hansen's introduction of that amendment, I would simply, looks like Senator Friesen, if Senator Friesen would like my time, he can have it, since what I was going to talk about is no longer relevant.
Thank you, Senator LeGrone. Senator Friesen, if you'd like to use this, 4 minutes 40.
Yes, I would. I guess I need to clarify some things. From what I understand from the contractors that wanted this bill, they were never told that this bill would be held in committee. They were told all along that it would come out. I think there was a misunderstanding. I understood it that the bill would not come out unless it had the attachment. So I want to clarify that. I was not involved in those conversations. They were looking for a priority designation. They're the ones that requested a later hearing. I was not involved in that. So I just want to be clear. I understood it from my communications that it was being held in committee. So whether that was or not, I cannot answer that, but I just want to make sure that we have on the record that there is a little miscommunication in this whole process here. And so this is what happens sometimes when you try to tie things together. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Speaker Scheer.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I apologize to those that might be in the queue because I did jump the line on this specific event. I want to take this time to stand in front of you and apologize publicly to Senator Hansen. He should have expected, and I should have shown the respect to him as chairman to go discuss my concerns with him before I got on the mic. I did not. That is my fault, and I apologize for any insinuation of personal attack on the senator's basis, and I just want to do this publicly because if the roles were reversed, I would have appreciated a heads up from somebody that was going to make the comments that I did, and for that, I want to sincerely apologize to Senator Hansen. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Wishart.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I stand a little bit concerned about what's going on right now. From listening to both sides of the issue, it sounds like it was a miscommunication. And I want us to bring us back to what I thought was a really exciting collaboration where Senator Friesen had a bill that became prioritized, and we were able to put Senator Crawford's bill, which had missed being able to advance on final reading by a few votes because of weather conditions that prohibited some senators who did support that bill from being here. And as a staff member who was raised in this legislature since I was 24 years old, I have seen this happen before. I have seen where senators, even if you didn't agree with the bill and you were still planning on voting no, I have seen where senators have recognized a circumstance where other senators who did support that bill couldn't be there that day. I've seen it on both sides of the aisle, where we were the best versions of ourselves and we helped to get that bill in a fair way across the finish line. So that's what we're doing today. So I hope we will go back to the kind of energy that we started with on this discussion of 428 with AM 758, and we advance this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wishart. Senator Groney.
Thank you. I was looking at the vote on this bill at 306. Just to clarify, it wasn't a sure thing. It wasn't even close to a sure thing that the votes were there. 20 voted yes, 15 no. Present not voting was 9. That's usually a soft no. That's 24. When you're present not voting, when I'm present and not voting, it's a soft no. It's not a yes, maybe, it's a no. And then excused was 5. And when I look at those 5 excused, I see at least 1, maybe 2 that were no's. 306 died legitimately in debate in the process. It needs to remain. And if it needs to be brought back next year revised as the amendment was, that's the correct process. That's the way. I wouldn't dream of taking one of my bills and rewriting it and sticking it on to somebody else's bill. I've never done that. If it had fair debate and it was rejected by the body, it's dead. Our time is limited here. We all compete for that time. I will never try to steal from somebody else's time on their priority bill by bringing it back in an amendment. Now, everybody's different, and everybody wants their, but the point I wanted to make, if you pull up the vote on 306, there was no 25 votes there for it. Even with a call of the House, it would have probably lost after debate. More than likely when you look at that. So it died. It died a legitimate death, and bring it back, fix it, and we, as I always say, when people ask me, you didn't get anything done, I said, well, 151 years now this state has existed without this legislation. It'll last another year or 2 until you do it right. And mending it to somebody else's bill the second time around isn't doing it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Groney. Senator Mosier.
Well, I think based on my discussion with Senator Matt Hansen and Senator Crawford that their offer to remove that part of the bill removes my objection to it. And so they're sincere in their offer to take that out, and therefore I would support 428 or the remainder of the amendment, but without the 306 portion. And I'm willing to take their word on it that they're going to remove that.
Thanks, Senator Mosher.
Thank you.
Senator Matt Hansen, you recognize to close on FA 41.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, colleagues. Just again to really clarify what we're doing. So Floor Amendment 41 is an amendment to the committee amendment. That strikes all of sections 1 and 3, which were the sections that contained Senator Crawford's legislative bill 306. And that will then remove them from the committee amendment, and then the committee amendment will just leave a cleanup language suggested by our State Department of Labor to fix the fiscal note on Senator Friesen's LB 428. I want to just thank everybody for helping to clarify the record on this bill. It has always been my intent to be very transparent and straightforward on how we were handling this, and I maybe can learn some lessons about clarity in the future. But going forward, Floor Amendment 41, I would urge your adoption because that takes the Senator Crawford's sections entirely out of the Business Labor Committee amendment, leaving that just a technical change to the fiscal note for Senator Friesen's bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Members, heard the debate on FA 41. The question for the body is the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
37 ayes, 4 nays on the adoption of the floor amendment.
FA 41 is adopted. Further discussion on LB 428 and the pending committee amendment as amended. Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or President, sorry. I just wanted to offer some clarification on the remarks that Senator Groney just made about the vote on final file. Yes, there were 20 yeses and 15 noes, and that is because if you look at the history of the vote on LB 306, 7 people changed their votes, and there were 5 yes votes not present that morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Matt Hansen, you recognize to close on the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I said before, the committee amendment now amended by the Floor Amendment 41 contains language suggested by our State Department of Labor to make sure LB 428 is in compliance with federal rules and federal law. That will eliminate the fiscal note as I understand it. So I would urge your adoption of the committee amendment AM 758. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Members, the question for the body is the adoption of AM 758 committee amendment. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
42 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the committee amendment.
Committee amendment is adopted. Final discussion on LB 428 as amended. Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to follow up to my own comments, that there are consequences when we change our votes and don't inform those that are the introducer, and it sowed seeds of distrust in the body. This was an opportunity for us to rectify what I viewed as a misstep early on in the session. I'm sorry for Senator Crawford's bill that it isn't being carried forward, because I think that it's a really wonderful piece of legislation that is very impactful for many Nebraskans. We have an aging population, and having the opportunity for family members to be a caregiver is actually an enormous savings to our taxpayers. So I'm sorry that we weren't able to carry this over the finish line, and I'm just so grateful to Senator Crawford for her thoughtful legislation and her diligence in this. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Bosselman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Friesen yield to some questions?
Senator Friesen, yield, please.
Yes, I would.
On 428, I'd like you to talk a little bit more about this. I see there's $14,000 annual federal grant funds that are, I believe, lost. Could you explain exactly who's going to be funding the unemployment portion for these contractors that are not working over the winter then? How does that work?
The contractors are paying that by, you're paying on a higher portion of your wages over the year. So they're funding this themselves.
And the grant in here, how does that affect other unemployment, if at all?
It shouldn't affect any of the other rates that I know of.
And that 14,000 or 14 million, is it 14 million?
Well, they have expenditures of 14 million and they have revenue of 14 million. But
So on that, is that going to affect any other federal dollars coming into the state? Do you know?
not that I know of, but I do not know that.
And about how many individuals do you believe are affected by this bill, as far as those who would receive that benefit? Do you know?
I couldn't tell you. All I can say is that they have been doing this for numerous years, but now when the Department of Labor decided to shorten up that time frame, it did not fit this group of construction workers, I guess, from that standpoint. So this involves a lot more workers than just the construction industry from the roads side of it. All industry construction used this process previously. But when they shortened up the window, that would have changed the numbers. And so now we're widening that window for highway construction type workers, or what their code is, it labels it here, but they're a certain industry. It's very limited to that industry.
Okay, I guess where I'm at is just ensuring that we're not putting at risk other federal dollars or other agencies, other unemployment areas by doing this. This is something that holds harmless, if you will, in some senses, how it may affect other industries or other unemployment services in the state.
Like I said, I think with this very narrow window of people that are available for this, and they have now the requirement to pay on more of their wages. I think it was raised to 24,000 or something like that, but they're paying more into the system to make up what they're getting back. And from what I understand, it should have no impact on anyone else.
So this is a self-imposed raise of unemployment fees for the contractor?
Yes, they had to find funding for it because they wanted to be carved out and be treated differently than the other industry.
Okay, thank you. Yield the rest of my time back to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Bosman. Senator Friesen. I see no further discussion of the bill. Senator Friesen, you recognize to close on the advance of the bill to ENR initial. Senator Friesen? He waives closing. Question for the body is advance of LB 428 to ENR initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
44 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the advancement of LB 428.
LB 428 advances. Proceeding now to the next committee priority bill, LB 31. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, if I might, just before we go there, enrollment and review reports 23 to select file. And Senator Lathrop has an amendment to 538 to be printed. Mr. President, LB 31 is a bill by Senator Colterman relating to retirement. It provides for a work plan relating to a transfer of management of the retirement system operating in the Class 5 School Employees Retirement Act to the Nebraska Public Employees Retirement Systems. The bill was introduced on January 10, referred to the Retirement Systems Committee. The bill was advanced to general file. I have committee amendments as well as an amendment to those committee amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Colterman, recognized to open LB 31.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to thank Senator Colterman for prioritizing this bill. I introduced LB 31 at the request of OPS in order to start the process of examining whether management of the Omaha Public School Pension Plan known as OSER, should be transferred to the Public Employees Retirement Board. The PERB oversees the state-administered plans, which include the county, state, school, judges, and state patrol plans. I'm committed to continuing to work with OPS and OSERs to help them be successful in finding solutions to meet their funding responsibilities in their current plan. I want something to be very clear on the record. This bill that I'm introducing does not propose merging the OSER's plan into the school plan. I also want to be clear that the liability for OSER's unfunded liability, which is around $770 million right now, remains with OPS. LB 31 does not change that, nor is it my intent that the state or any entity of the state would take on that liability. I also want to address Marcus Snow's testimony at the hearing on LB 31. Mr. Snow is president of the OPS Board of Education and testified that OPS has been working with the legislature to move forward towards a merger of the OSER's plan with the School Employees Retirement Plan administered by the PERB. He testified that LB 31 is intended to create a realistic path towards such a merger. His testimony concerned me a great deal because I'm definitely not supporting a merger of these plans, given that OSER's is $770 million unfunded. After the hearing, I spoke with Dr. Cheryl Logan, the OPS superintendent, as well as John Lindsay, lobbyist for OPS, and let them know that in order for me to be willing to advance the bill from committee, I needed a letter from OPS expressing their understanding that the purpose of LB 31 is not to create a plan or to create a merger between OSER's and the school plan, and I needed clarification that the OPS remains liable for the OSER's unfunded actuarial liability. I received the requested letter in an email on March 29th. A copy of that email has been distributed to each one of you. I plan to read that into the record of the text of Mr. Snow's letter. I feel it's important that that be on the record. So on March 19th, LB 31 was heard by the Nebraska Retirement Systems Committee. During that hearing, I testified as president of the Omaha Public School Board of Education in support of LB 31. During my testimony, I used the term merger to describe the impact of LB 31. The word was not well chosen. Transfer of management would have been a better term, and I would ask if it is possible that the record include this letter revising my remarks. It is the hope of OPS that with passage of LB 31, a study would be authorized which would ultimately formulate legislation along the lines described by you, Senator Colderman, in your remarks to the committee, that OSER's would become the sixth plan managed by the state, along with the state school employees, state patrol, judges, county employees, and state employees. The difference between the other 5 plans and OSER's would be that OPS would remain liable for unfunded actuarial liability. Because of this significant difference, merger does not accurately describe the proposal, and transfer of management is a better term. Thank you for the opportunity to correct this misstatement in the testimony. Please feel free to contact me with any questions. Sincerely, Marcus A. Snow, President, OPS Board of Education. I appreciated receiving this letter and believe it clears up the record regarding OPS's understanding of the purpose and goal of LB 31 and the fact that OPS remains liable for paying the OSER's unfunded actuarial liability. Now for a bill description. LB 31 requires the Public Employees Retirement Board, known as the PERB, in consultation with the Retirement Committee, OSER's, OPS, and other stakeholders to prepare a work plan that identifies the tasks, process, costs, and timeline involved in transferring management of the OSER's plan to the PERB. The work plan requires several things. A comparison of the annual OSER's administration costs to the estimated cost for the PERB if it would take on management of the OSER's plan. Establishment of timelines for completion of tasks. And identification of the tasks and cost of transfer management from OSERS to PERB, including assessments of the following categories: administration, actuarial service, accounting, computer infrastructure, information technology, member data and record transfers, necessary statutory changes, staff training and assessment of staffing needs, educational and communication plans to fully inform all system stakeholders and affected governmental entities regarding management changes. LB 31 specifies that a transfer of management does not, and I repeat, does not include a merger or consolidation of OSERS with the school plan, nor does it include assumptions of the unfunded liability by the state of Nebraska, NEPRS, or the PERB. The work plan must be completed and submitted to the legislature by June 30th, 2020. Again, I want to be clear, this bill only directs that a study be completed. It does not direct PERB to take on the management of the OSERS plan. As you can see from the fiscal note, NEPRS has estimated that their costs will amount to about $140,000. I believe this estimate is extremely reasonable for all the work they will conduct for their work plan. Throughout the interim and sessions, I have met a number of times with the NEPRS director, Randy Gierke, NEPRS legal counsel, Orrin Hill, to answer their questions and discuss details about my intent for completion of the work plan. We have discussed a very preliminary list of tasks, questions, and issues they anticipate will need to be addressed in completion of this study. I am very comfortable with the commitment and expertise of Mr. Gierke and his staff to conduct a thorough analysis of the tasks, assess related costs, and estimate timelines that would be involved in transferring management of the OSERS plan to the PERB. I have faith that Mr. Gierke and his staff are mindful of controlling costs in preparation of this work plan. At the same time, they understand their responsibility to ensure that the state would bear no cost if a transfer of management does occur in future years. I've also spoken with OPS and shared with them my belief that NEPR's current cost estimates in this fiscal notes are extremely reasonable. I have received the assurance of OPS that they will pay for the costs associated with producing the work plan. Again, I want to be very clear. No general fund dollars will be spent to produce this study. Let me say that again. No general fund dollars will be spent to produce this study. There is an A bill on LB 31, but it is solely for the purpose of granting spending authority for NEPRS to expend the funds received from OPS for the work and expenses the agency incurs in completing the work plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. As the clerk indicated, there are amendments from the Retirement Committee. Senator Coltman, you're recognized to open the committee amendment.
Thank you very much. I'd like to explain Committee Amendment AM 1169. AM 1169 really becomes the bill. After the bill was introduced, several issues were raised that I felt were important to incorporate into the bill. In addition to the original provisions, AM 1169 includes the following items. Any written request from PERB for documents, data, and other information must be provided within 30 days. OSERS is granted authority to bill OPS and requires OPS to pay for any time or expenses OSERS incurs in responding to requests from PERB in completion of the work plan. Number 3, it creates a fund to deposit OPS payments to OSERS to pay for work completed by OSERS in response to the PERB requests. And number 4, it adds the emergency clause so that we can get moving on this bill. In conclusion, depending on the information provided in the work plan in 2020, the committee will decide whether or not to move forward with legislation to direct the PERB to take on the management of OSERS. I believe this study is a prudent step to take at this time and ask for your support. I would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. Madam Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Colterman would move to amend with AM 1247.
Senator Coltman, you're recognized to open your amendment to the committee amendment.
Thank you. And this is just a cleanup, we discovered that AM 1247 strikes the language creating the fund for Class 5 school employees' retirement plans, known as OSERs. After further discussion with OSER's executive director, it was determined that this fund is not necessary. The provisions of this amendment do not affect any of the provisions in the committee amendment.
Thanks, Senator Coltman. Debate is now open on LB 31 and the pending committee amendment and amendment to the committee amendment. Senator Clements.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Colterman yield to a question?
Senator Coltman, would you yield, please?
Yes, I will.
I'm reading or looking at the email from Mr. Snow. This email does not commit them to pay for this. And is there a written document that said they're going to reimburse the NPERS for the expenses?
I believe it's in the amendment that we just proposed.
Well, that's asking them to pay for it,
Yeah.
but
I just have their commitment that they will pay for it, the Board of Education.
and I heard that you said OPS would pay for it, not OSERS. Wouldn't this be something OSERS would pay for as management?
Actually, OSERS will not, am I free to speak?
Yes.
OSERS, we didn't ask OSERS to pay for this because that would affect the plan itself, take money out of the plan, and OPS voluntarily offered to pay for these costs.
And if NPERS starts managing this, who would pay the management fees ongoing?
The management fees are currently absorbed by the plan holders once it's in place. So as an example, the 6 plans that we already manage, those fees all come out of the plans. And so once it's established, the contributions that are made help pay for those costs.
All right, that's why I was wondering why OPS wouldn't pay for this study, but that's all right with me. Do we think that NPERS would be more efficient and less cost in the management of OSERS? Will there be a financial advantage?
Yes, we do, and that's why they brought the bill to me. They felt like we've managed their investments now for 4 years, and our investment committee, our investment council has done a tremendous job. And since they've seen how well they've done there, they thought that they could probably do a better job of managing the plan. I would just tell you that, if it's all right,
Yes.
I would tell you that our school investment plans, the last 10-year average has been 7.79%. The OSERS plan has been 4.65. The last 3 years, it's been 7.9 for the states and 3.47 for OSERS. So looking at those better returns that we're receiving, the fact that we already managed 6 other plans, counting the defined contribution plan, it makes sense that we manage this plan for them as well.
Thank you. I think that does answer the questions I had. I appreciate Mr. Snow calling this a transfer of management and not a merger. I definitely also would be very concerned with the talk of merger. And since we're managing the investments in a similar transfer, one more question, please. If this work study turns out to be, looks like it's feasible and possible, then what's the next step? Is there legislation required in the future?
Yes, if after we evaluate the plan and decide that it is cost effective for us to manage the plan, taking everything into consideration, they will have to come back with a bill recommending that the plan be managed by the PERB and that the cost would be spelled out, that they're still responsible for the liabilities at that point in time. This merely does a study because we're just guessing at would it be efficient or wouldn't it be efficient. And since they were willing to take on all the liabilities as a public school district, we felt like it was a good way for us to go.
Thank you. I also did want to establish that this wasn't binding us into the agreement, subject to how the study turns out. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senators Clements and Colterman. Senator LeGrone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Colterman yield to a question?
Senator Colterman, yield, please.
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Senator Colterman. Real quick, just off of Senator Clements' comments, I might have gotten a little confused there. So does the bill, based on that, the bill effectively, correct me if I'm wrong here, it's the question, does it just allow OPS to pay for this study, or does it require OPS pay for this study?
OPS came to us and said they would pay for the study since the PERB has no money to pay for it. NEPRS has no money to pay for it. It shouldn't come out of state coffers. And we didn't feel like it was fair to take it out of the OSER's plan. So they said we told them if we wanted this to happen, they're going to have to pay for it. And they agreed to it with, as long as the costs were reasonable. And they saw the estimate of $140,000, which you'll see with the A bill, and felt that they were reasonable. That's why we thought we needed to clarify with AM 1247.
Okay.
Or 1169.
So is that contained in the bill, or is that just an agreement auxiliary to the bill?
Yeah, the bill language requires OPS to pay.
Okay, that's what I thought when I saw it. I just got confused by your conversation with Senator Clements. What I actually was going to ask you, though, was I support the bill wholeheartedly. I get where we are now, and I think you did a great job of explaining that in your various openings, plethora of them that you had. I was just wondering if you could give a little background for those of us that are newer on the situation facing that retirement plan and how we kind of got here.
Thank you for the question. My freshman year, I got on the retirement committee. And at that point in time, there was a bill for us to take over the management and transfer the plan to us of their investments. And we fought that on the floor of the legislature and said, no, we're not going to take on that liability. We would consider managing the money for you. The next year, when I became chair after Senator Nordquist left, we brought the bill back, asking us to manage the money and for them by the state investment. That bill advanced, and so we transferred the money from that plan, the investment money from that plan, to our plan for management, or to our investment council. And I think, as I said, that's been about 4 years ago now. But we had their returns, and actually prior to 2008, that's where all this really happened. In 2008, they moved a bunch of money around, and their investments started going south on them. And you can read the Omaha World Herald articles about that. So the plan became underfunded dramatically. And so we decided to actually try and help them. So for the last 4 years, we've worked with their administration, we've worked with OSERS, we've worked with their lobby at ways to help them fund their unfunded liability. And as we talked and they started looking at our plans and how well our state plans are managed, they asked, would you be interested in managing this plan for us? And so we've been talking about that for probably 3 years now. Our plans are well managed. I can't say enough good about the Public Employees Retirement Board and NEPRS. In fact, if you look at nationally, we're recognized nationally very high in having well-funded plans all across the board.
1 minute.
And so as we took a look at that, it became evident that it wasn't going in the right direction. And so we agreed to help them, and we talked to NEPRS about it. They said we would be interested, but we need to know what cost liabilities would be involved. And so that's where it brought us to today. I would tell you that we have a very open and good relationship with Dr. Logan, the new superintendent. I believe that we have a great relationship with OSERS, their management, and our committee has studied this quite extensively. This came out of committee unanimously. So that's where we're at, and I appreciate you asking that question.
And thank you for that explanation. Thank you for your work on this issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senators LeGrone and Senator Colterman. Senator Mosier.
was wondering if I could ask Senator Coulterman a couple of questions, please.
Absolutely. Senator Coulterman, yield, please.
Okay. So as I understand this, this study is going to look into the state taking over management of their fund?
Yes, it is.
Okay. To look and see whether it's wise, whether it would be effective, cost effective?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that play into that. Do we use the same actuary? How do you pay for administration? Are we going to eliminate administration? Who does your accounting versus who does our
administration
accounting?
of the plan you're talking about, not school administration.
Who does your accounting versus our accounting? They have a different software maybe than we have. So all those things have to be looked at before we can establish whether or not it's cost effective for us to do this.
Yeah, it appears that the state of Nebraska has gotten better returns than what they've gotten, and so that's what's making it look promising to them to combine with the state, I would assume.
Well, and it goes even deeper than just returns. So as an example, we have the state plan and the county plan. They're 100% funded. They're a little bit different types of plan. They're cash balance plans. But our state patrol plan, our judges plan, and our teacher plan, they're all well funded. They're well above the 80% that you use as a test to find out whether they're funded adequately. This plan is funded at about 64% of where it should be. And so they look at that and they say, hey, we think you could do that kind of work for us, but we want to make sure that it's cost effective for everybody.
So we're not going to assume any liability to get that funded at a higher level?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Yeah, that I think, and I know you said those things before, but intermixed with your whole 10-minute discussion, I just thought it'd be good to ask those questions directly so that everybody understands that we've done a good job in handling these other pension funds, and hopefully we could help them with theirs. Now, one other question. Their retirement is a guaranteed benefit rather than a guaranteed contribution, right?
It's a defined benefit plan, just like our state teacher retirement, just like our state patrol, and just like our judges' plans.
And do their rates compare to the state teacher plan that we administer?
I would tell you, over the last 3 years, we've been working hard to bring the new employees, new hires, into a level that's equal to what we have on the state teacher retirement plan, in our plan. So the benefits are very similar, but in the past, they've had richer benefits in our teacher retirement. That could be some of the reason that they've got the problems that they've got. So what we do is we create new tiers as we go forward. So anybody that's hired after a certain date gets into a different tier than somebody that's been there for 20 years. So it's going to take a long time for all that to wash off the books. And so we can't really merge them. It'd be very difficult for us to merge them even if we wanted to merge them. So that's why we think it's important to just manage the plan. It's be another standalone plan. The PERB and NEPRS does a great job. We think it could be cost effective for everyone.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Goldman. Senator Mosier. Senator Halloran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to be the second person to thank Senator Coulterman for bringing this, prioritizing this bill. And I would yield the balance of my time to Senator Coulterman if he wishes for.
Senator Coulterman, 440.
I don't need a lot of time, but I would just like to say that just so you understand how well we have managed our plans, and this isn't my committee's, this is really the PERB and NEPRS. The judges' plan this past year increased from 93.6% funded to 96.1% funded. The school plan increased from 86.7% funded to 88.8% funded. The state patrol plan went from 85% to 87%. And this is with a down market at the end of the year. So because of the way we're funding these plans and the way that the management is taking place, We think we're going in the right direction. We see no reason why this couldn't happen for OPS, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we don't have any of their liabilities and that we're going to do it in a cost-effective manner. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Senator Holler and Senator Colterman. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Colterman, you're welcome to close on AM 1247. He waives closing. The question before us is adoption of AM 1247. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
41 ayes, no nays on adoption of the amendment to the committee amendments.
AM 1247 is adopted. Returning to floor discussion, seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Colterman, you're welcome to close on AM 1169. He waives closing. Question before us is adoption of AM 1169. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
43 ayes, no nays on adoption of committee amendments.
AM 1169 is adopted. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Colterman, you're welcome to close on LB 31. He waives closing on LB 31. The question before us is advancement of LB 31 to ENR initial. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
42 ayes, no nays on the advancement of LB 31.
LB 31 is advanced to ENR initial. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
31A is a bill by Senator Colterman that appropriates funds to implement the provisions of LB 31.
Senator Colterman, you're welcome to open on LB 31A.
Thank you, Mr. President. This A bill only grants the PERB a spending authority to hire an information technology consultant to help the PERB in carrying out its obligations to prepare a work plan regarding the transfer of management from OSERS to the PERB. There are no general fund dollars appropriated for this study, and the Omaha Public School District is obligated under LB 31 to pay all the costs and expenses that the PERB incurs in carrying out this duty. I would encourage you to support LB 31A.
Thank you, Senator Colterman. Is there any floor discussion? Seeing none, Senator Colterman, you're welcome to close on LB 31A.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all of you for the discussion that we had about this bill. I want to make it very clear that over the last 4 years, we have worked very hard to have good dialogue with Omaha Public Schools and all the plan sponsors. And I will tell you that I'm absolutely opposed to us taking over any liabilities of Omaha Public Schools, and they know that. At the same time, I think they understand that they see the value of what we can bring to them as a state, and I look forward to working with them in the interim to get this study completed and move forward with the possibility of us managing the plan. If it isn't cost effective, we will not do it. Also, I would like to say thank you publicly to Randy Gierke, Warren Hill, also the superintendent of schools, Dr. Cheryl Logan up in Omaha, John Lindsay and his staff. They have all made this work very pleasurable, and I think that they deserve a shout out. And finally, I would tell you that my my legal counsel, Kate Allen, as well as my staff, the rest of my staff, Katie Quintero, Tyler Mayhood, have done a tremendous job in helping with all this. So thank you, and I would encourage you to vote green on LB 31A.
Thank you, Senator Colderman. The question before us is adoption of LB 31A to ENR initial. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
40 ayes, no nays on the advancement of LB 31A.
LB 31A is advanced to ENR initial. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
Legislative Bill 638 was a bill introduced by Senator Stinner. It's a bill for regulating the cash reserve fund. It changes provision relating to the transfer of excess general fund net receipts to the cash reserve fund. Introduced on January 23 of this year. At that time, referred to the Appropriations Committee for public hearing. The bill is advanced to general file. There are committee amendments pending, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Stinner, you're welcome to open on LB 638.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Legislature, the purpose of LB 638 is to modify the current deposit rule to the cash reserve fund. The current rule requires a transfer from the general fund to the cash reserve in excess of actual general fund receipts from estimating receipts for the fiscal year. LB 638 would add an alternative rule and require the greater of the two amounts be deposited into the cash reserve fund. We have passed out a formula for the alternative rule. It looks a little bit crazy, I know that, but basically what we're trying to do is to set a 20-year trend line, which is about 4.22% as a minimum amount for this computation, and anything above that 50% then would be computed. Right now, we are in a situation where it is just put into the cash reserve based on forecasting errors. LB 638 would also cap the deposits allowed into the cash reserve fund at 16% of expenditures to allow for other budgetary priorities. There's always a question how much is an adequate reserve or a fully funded reserve. I think we've arrived at 16% as a fully funded and adequate reserve. The reason LB 635 is necessary is to ensure transfers into the cash reserve fund are regularly made during revenue upswings and to enact an evidence-based maximum fund for the balance for the fund. Currently, our method for depositing into the fund is based solely on forecasting error. Under current law, the fund is financed with the end-of-year surpluses that occur when the general fund revenue exceeds its projected forecast. While this practice has resulted in good revenue reserve growth over the past decade, it relies on revenue overperforming its forecast to general savings. Colleagues, I'd just like to reiterate a few points. First is that this change will always maintain at least as much in transfers as it does under the current law. LB 638 simply adds an alternative rule and selects the greater of the two amounts. Second is that the rainy day funds work best when balances increase during economic growth periods and are primarily used during down periods. States most effectively accomplish this with policies that require deposits to the rainy day fund when revenue growth exceeds a clearly defined threshold. And lastly, Nebraska is one of just 4 states that lack a maximum balance or savings target for the rainy day fund. Establishing evidence-based methods for depositing into the rainy day funds and finding a consensus-based savings target as laid out under LB 638 leads to greater transparency and clarity in the savings. So I want to give you a little bit of an example of what might happen in a revenue growth period. We may have a forecast of 5% growth. We hit that 5% growth. Nothing under the current rule would be put into the rainy day fund. If we have a 20-year baseline at 4.2, for an example, the difference between 4.2 and 5 would be 0.8. 0.8 times, say, $5 billion in revenues, 40 million. Divide that by 2, we would have put in $20 million into the cash reserve. Under current situations, even though the revenue growth was was at 5%, we would not have because there was no forecasting error. So this adds a little bit of a discipline, mostly when revenues are increasing above that baseline, would this alternative start to kick in. With your consent, Mr. President, I would request that we move on to the committee amendment AM 800.
Please proceed.
AM 800 would allow the balance in the cash reserve fund to exceed 16% of the budgeted general fund expenditures each fiscal year if the legislature determines it is necessary to prepare for or respond to budgetary requirements such as capital construction or emergencies. This would allow flexibility in the legislature's priorities. It was felt at the committee level, we don't want to tie the legislature's hands with the 16% cap. And actually, if you reflect on what we've done, and I've tried to demonstrate this in our meetings in Nebraska City, actually with the transfers for projects, over the last couple fiscal years, we've transferred for projects $333 million, where we've helped the general funds balance in the budget of 246. So 57% were actually due to one-time spends, one-time capital projects, one-time spends to start the transportation fund. I can't remember what we actually named that transportation, but there was $50 million put into the transportation fund to start the expressway project. So that's kind of the background behind this. It's an alternative. It's one that says when revenue's swinging up, we should be disciplined enough in this legislature to at least provide for the half of the incremental increase over a 20-year trend. I don't think it constrains spending because it'll be a 20-year trend and half of what the incremental increase is. So on that, I would ask that you vote green, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Stinner. Senator McAllister, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to congratulate Chairman Stinner for bringing this bill. When I was at the Platt Institute, we often did studies on the state financial rankings. And according to the Mercatus Center, Nebraska currently ranks #1 in fiscal condition, #1. And we've held that ranking for quite a few years. In fact, I think the governor even lists that among his many accomplishments. Okay, what is that based on? It's based on cash solvency, which is going to be impacted by this bill, budget solvency, long-run solvency, service level solvency, and trust fund solvency. So those are factors that go into this particular ranking by Mercatus. And just so you know, the top 5 states are Nebraska, South Dakota, Tennessee, Florida, and the final 5th ranking state is Oklahoma. The bottom states, want to know that as well. That would include Kentucky, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Illinois. No surprise about Illinois. So this is a good bill, and I thank the Senator Stinner for bringing it, and I would encourage your positive vote for AM 800 and LB 638. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McAllister. Senator Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. Some of you know that the Planning Committee has looked at the rainy day fund and the cash reserve for the last year, maybe 2 years. And when we had our Legislative Council meeting, you had a report from us talking about the importance of that fund. And a couple of things that I think we are very fortunate to have. One is the restriction that we basically can't spend money that we don't have. And the second one is that we have been blessed with a rainy day fund. However, that rainy day fund has become somewhat depleted. The Planning Committee put as a significant priority the replenishing of that fund. And during our discussions of that, it became evident that the method currently of putting additional funds in that is based on forecasting error. which is kind of counterintuitive to me that as someone who has been in a business, the banking business, that depends on reserves, that you fund during good times so that you have reserves during some more difficult times, just seemed counterintuitive to me that we would be only funding the rainy day fund when we had a forecasting error. So I applaud the approach that Senator Stinner has put together here to create an alternative to that. And again, it doesn't remove the idea of funding it with an error in the forecasting board, but it gives us an alternative, and we fund to the highest of those, I believe. So with that, I would strongly encourage your adoption of the AM 800 and LB 638. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Williams. Senator Clements, you're recognized.
Would Senator Stinner yield to a question, please?
Senator Stinner, would you please yield?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Senator Stinner. I voted for this in the committee. I thought just a couple of questions might make it a little bit more clear. In the formula, actual revenue, is that revenue for a biennium or just for 1 year?
That's for 1 year. We do a certification of that revenue every year. So we certify, and the certified revenue versus actual, the certified forecast versus actual, that's when we put the money into the rainy day fund. This would add another calculation to it, so the larger of the two would be put into the rainy day fund.
And that 1 year is then the second year of the biennium. Is that right?
I think it's every year we do the computation.
Oh, okay, every year. And if you took 16% times our most recent actual revenue, about what would the dollar amount target be?
Well, our target would be around 800 million.
All right, and I believe, I wasn't here, but we have had a rainy day fund close to that, haven't we?
Yes, we have, actually. I think we spent it down. We were actually at 17%, and I believe it was like 755 million, and that we spent it down to where we're at today.
And was there a national organization that said 16% was a good target?
Yes, the Pew Foundation has helped me over the last 2 years to kind of come up with this methodology.
I knew that because they testified before our committee a year ago, and I agreed with their information. But I see that the amendment would add, would the amendment add capital construction projects to above the 16% target?
It could either be a part of the 16% or be added to it, yes. Or any other emergency that might come, like the Great Flood.
Yes. Well, I do. Thank you, Senator Stinner. One other thing that had been mentioned in our committee was if we have a good year, a good percentage of increase of revenue, but the forecasting board had predicted that same good percentage, currently our procedure does not increase our rainy day fund. And so I thought this was a good way to use excess money or good revenue from good years to make sure that we do provide for reserves. And also as a banker, reserves are important. Like in the hard times in the 80s when banks were having trouble, farmers were having trouble. My grandfather made it through the 30s barely, and he had made sure that our reserves were about double what they needed to be. And in about 1986, the FDIC let us know that they needed to be, and carved out about half of them, and we still were able to survive by having a good reserve built up during good years. And I applaud Senator Stinner for bringing forward this proposal, and I ask you for a green vote for AM 800 and LB 638. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements and Senator Stinner. Senator Bowles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I debated whether or not to rise on the mic this afternoon. Since Senator Clements raised the 16%, I did think that it was important to put on the record the way that I think about the amendment and the bill. 16%, I think we've had conversations like this before. A cash reserve of 16% is about 2 months worth of reserve. It's a recommendation that is part of the advice from national experts. But I want to be clear, I don't think that passage of this bill says that 16% is the right amount or that it says that 16% is enough. I think we all have different comfort levels with what the cash reserve should be from our own perspectives. The one difference that I think is worth articulating on the microphone about the recommendations from the Pew Charitable Trust and the other national folks who gave us some of these guidelines and who supported the strategy that is in LB 638 and that Senator Stinner is recommending is that this kind of percentage reserve is adequate in most scenarios in terms of economic volatility. What is different about Nebraska is that sometimes we use our cash reserve for capital projects. For example, we invested in the Buffett Cancer Center. And so because we are not exactly like every other state, we do it our own way. I want it to be clear on the record that 16% is a guidepost. It is a goal. It is a focal point. But it is not necessarily articulating that that is enough or that there are circumstances in which we might have a different number that is appropriate given the year and the issues in front of us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bowles. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Stinner, you're welcome to close on AM 800. He waives closing. Question before us is adoption of AM 800 to LB 638. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
33 ayes, no nays on adoption of committee amendments.
AM 800 is adopted. Seeing no one further wishing to speak, Senator Stinner, you're welcome to close on LB 638. He waives closing. The question before us is the advancement of LB 638T in our initial. All those in favor, please vote aye. All opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
35 ayes, no nays on the advancement of LB 638.
LB 638 is advanced in our initial. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
698 by Senator Bostelman. It's a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska rules of the road. It changes load provisions and penalties for commercial motor vehicle and commercial trailers. Introduced in January 23, referred to the Transportation Telecommunications Committee. Advanced to general file. There are committee amendments, and there is an amendment to those committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Bosselman, you're welcome to open on LB 698.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon, colleagues. LB 698 amends current law to provide a penalty for commercial motor vehicles and trailers. The new penalty will provide that no person shall drive or move a commercial motor vehicle or commercial trailer upon any highway unless the cargo or contents carried by the commercial motor vehicle or trailer are properly distributed and adequately secured to prevent the falling of cargo or content from the vehicle. I bring this bill because of the issues within my district regarding commercial vehicles driving to and from the Butler County landfill on Highway 92 and other roads in the county without proper securement or of trash contents and inadequate equipment. This landfill receives waste from 20 counties, including Iowa's Potawatomi County. In total, it receives over 200 semi-loads of waste a day. And in 2017-18, it had 800,000 tons of waste deposited. I have handed out 2 pages with several pictures that clearly show you the problem found on and around our roadways. If you look on page 1, the pictures of a blue asbestos bag or bags on Highway 92. That's clearly seen in the bottom that it is an asbestos bag that come from a truck. Also pictures of plastics, a lot of plastic bags and those type of things in bushes along the roadway. And on page 2 and 3 are actual sequence of pictures from different videos taken from vehicles following a transport. And if you look at that, the large pieces of plastic are coming out, and on page 3, that piece of plastic goes right over the top of the vehicle behind them. The debris that they lose from their loads is not only an environmental problem, it is also a highway safety danger for other vehicles on the roadways, and the plastic results in costly damages to farm equipment and road maintenance equipment, the mowers, during planting and harvest. Twice a year, in fact, this Saturday, I personally conduct highway cleanup along these roadways and can attest to the type and amount of trash being lost from these transports. The bill separates out and distinguishes commercial vehicle violations from individual personal vehicle violations and increases the penalties associated with such. This bill is solely aimed at further deterring and penalizing the individuals and companies who refuse to comply with such load securement laws. There is a committee amendment that Senator Friesen will introduce and an amendment to the committee amendment pending on LB 698. There were no opponents, and there was a unanimous vote to advance this bill to general file. I ask for your support for the amendments and the underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Bossman. As the clerk noted, there is a committee amendment from the Transportation Committee. Senator Friesen, you're welcome to open on AM 554.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee amendment to LB 698 clarifies the penalty provision for violations relating to falling cargo. The first violation is a Class 3 misdemeanor. A second or subsequent violations are also Class 3 misdemeanors, but the Superintendent of Law Enforcement and Public Safety, in lieu of issuing a citation to a vehicle operator, may assess the owner of a vehicle a civil penalty of $1,000 for each violation. I know that Senator Bossman has an amendment to the committee amendment, which I will support, and I'd ask you to support the committee amendment after it has been amended by the Bossman amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Mr. Clerk, for a motion.
Mr. President, Senator Bostelman will move to amend AM 911.
Senator Bossman, you're welcome to open on AM 911.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there is an amendment to the committee amendment, and this is it. After reviewing the committee amendment, Senator Chambers pointed out a problem with the amendment and brought it to our attention. He met with Senator Friesen and myself to discuss the problem and suggested a correction. We appreciate his assistance. AM 911 is an amendment to the committee amendment that clarifies the first offense is an infraction and the driver shall be fined $200. For the second or subsequent infraction, the driver will be fined $500. In addition to the issuance of a citation, the Superintendent of Law Enforcement and Public Safety may assess the owner of the vehicle a civil penalty for each violation of this subsection of up to $1,000. I thank Senator Chambers for working with us to properly amend the committee amendment, and I ask for your green vote on AM 911 and the underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Bossman. Open to floor discussion. Seeing none, Senator Bossman, you're welcome to close on AM 911. He waives closing. The question before us is adoption of AM 911. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have we all voted that wish to? Please record.
34 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the amendment to the committee amendments.
AM 911 is adopted. Returning to floor discussion. Senator Brandt, you're recognized.
Would Senator Bosselman yield for a question?
Senator Bosselman, would you please yield?
Yes.
Does this affect grain haulers?
It should not, as long as they're properly secured and carrying things, no. And I have a comment to that here in just a minute.
Okay. I guess my concern is, I know in my neighborhood there's a lot of the older single axle trucks and such that don't use tarps. And if you're hauling grain in a high wind situation, you will see some corn or beans blow off on the edge of the road.
Are those farm trucks?
Yes. Okay.
You can ask.
I'll wait to listen to you.
My response, this is for commercial vehicles, so if it's a farm truck, it doesn't apply.
Okay,
Only commercial vehicles.
So a farm plate would be exempt?
I believe so, yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Senator Bosselman. Senator Blood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of both the amendment and Senator Bosselman's bill. I'd like to share with Senator Bosselman, if you go into the parking lot, you'll see that I have a cracked windshield caused from the remnants of a rendering truck hitting my windshield with blood and bones. And so I strongly support this bill and enthusiastically would like to vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Seeing no one else wishing to speak, Senator Friesen, you're welcome to close on AM 554. He waives closing. Question before us is the adoption of AM 554. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
35 ayes, no nays on adoption of committee amendments.
AM 554 is adopted. Returning to floor discussion. Seeing none, Senator Bosselman, you're welcome to close on LB 698.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I have noted, the bill is intended to address where contents of a load are not evenly distributed or adequately secured. We do recognize in the agriculture state that there may be times when there is an incidental seepage or leakage from a trailer of a commercial vehicle. This legislation is not intended to give State Patrol authority to pull over and ticket drivers or owners of commercial vehicles with content seeping or leaking from a commercial motor vehicle or commercial trailer hauling agricultural products when such seeping or leaking was not due to the inadequate securing of the contents or if the structure is not damaged or weakened. I do believe we all can appreciate that at one time or another driving down our highways that we have seen debris coming from a vehicle that's not properly secured. And I appreciate your support and your green light on LB 698. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bosselman. The question before us is the advancement of LB 698 to ENR initial. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
36 ayes, no nays on the advancement of LB 698.
LB 698 is advanced in our initial. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, a reminder the Appropriations Committee will meet upon adjournment in room 12, or 1003, excuse me, 1003. Senator Matt Hansen would like to add his name to 626. Senator Quick would move to adjourn the body until Wednesday, April 10 at 9 o'clock a.m.
Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. We are adjourned.